from FingerLakes1.com. This is Inside the FLX. I'm your host, Josh Durso, and today we're talking to two candidates for Seneca Falls Town Council. Douglas Avery and David DeLelys, both Democrats, are seeking two available seats in November's election. They will face off against Thomas Ruzicka and Stephen Turkett, Republicans. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, obviously, a lot of tough issues. Seneca Falls has been a really polarized community over the last few years. As two candidates, one incumbent, another challenger, tell us a little bit about yourselves and what makes you want to get involved for another term or now looking into Seneca Falls. Doug, we'll start with you.
Okay. I've been here since 1977. I basically came here right out of college to work for the school district. I taught for 35 years at the intermediate school in this building and then at the high school. I became involved in local politics through the landfill issue about 18 months ago. And that issue remains a big part of me and the way I think about things. But also since then, in the last 18 months, I've attended all the town board meetings. And so I've seen a lot of what happens. I've seen a lot of the results of some of that polarization and my perception of the sources of that polarization. And I think the atmosphere there is becoming toxic, and it's time to make some changes. And so I'd like to work with Dave and some other voices on the town board and try to make some sense out of all this.
And Dave, obviously no stranger to the board here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Lifelong resident, Seneca Falls, graduated from Minders, went into the service, came out a nuclear weapons assemblyman from 66 to 68. Went to Gould's Pumps, was there for 42 and a half years. I'm married to my wife, Jean, had a son, David, who was out in Denver. Became here in politics in 2010, I think it was. I became trustee and for the old village. Before that, I was on the Board of Assessment Review. And then I was over into the zoning board before I became trustee, because I had to resign from the zoning board when I got trusteeship, when I was chair of that. And I've been always involved, trying to be involved and help the people.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the specific issues. If each of you could, what would you say your top 2 or 3 issues are that you want to see addressed if you're elected in that coming term?
Okay.
Dave?
For me?
Sure.
Physical responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
We got to keep our taxes in line.
Right.
Want to open government. I think people should be able to talk at some of our meetings. I mean, Josh, you've been to meetings and people's been watching them on TV, and they're telling me that people have nothing to say, and I think that's a big issue. Mm-hmm. On that too. Our tax base with the landfill supposedly going to close in 2025, we're going to have to build up a reserve a little bit at a time. Maybe it should have started 20 years ago because we didn't know when it was really going to close. So, but that's going to be a big issue with people and what it's going to do to affect their taxes. Mm-hmm. So we got to try to keep Sonic control. We got to get some more businesses in the town so we can have a tax base. I'm on the Economic Development Committee. That's being on the board, and we got Longley Jones in for the hospital, mm-hmm. George Tilton in for the old police station. I mean, that's a start. If they get going at the hospital, and George, he was talking about like when he gets going full guns, it'll be by about 50 people. Mm-hmm. So that's, he's got a tax base. He's paying the taxes right off the bat. He didn't ask for a pilot. When Longley Jones took the hospital, that was a big thing there. We told them we didn't want a pilot. Mm-hmm. Pay the taxes, and they agreed to that. So,
Doug?
For me, the landfill, but not just closing them, but all of the issues that go with that, the fiscal issues that Dave just alluded to, and also the fact that in a lot of ways, what we've seen over the last 18 months or so is that they're behind the scenes pulling the strings. And So that leads into some of the open government transparency issues, where not only are petitioners to the town board being shut down if I'm literally gavelled to go sit down, if I stop talking and go sit down if they present an opposing view, but also there's very little debate or conversation among the board members as the issues are as the results of the issues come up. So decisions are obviously being made in the back room. The supervisor has a block of votes that basically gives him what he wants, and he's excluded everybody else from the decision-making process. And so just the way things are being done in the town board meetings, but also in the town in general, I think they just need to be addressed desperately.
Now, obviously, you alluded to it a little bit there, the polarization side of it, how divided people have become. Is that something that you guys see as really needing to be addressed in the coming years, obviously?
It does. I think it's been allowed to sort of feed on itself. And we were talking beforehand about the mailers that the landfill sent out a year ago. They, in part, I'm not blaming them for everything, but that had a big factor. It played a big factor in dividing people between those that want the landfill to close and those people who want to protect their tax rate. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the information they were being given was grossly overblown. And so I think that's the initial division between closing the landfill, keeping taxes down. But then there's been no attempt by the administration to try to bring people together. When Greg Lazaro chooses to align himself with the landfill, allow himself to be manipulated by the landfill, and as an example, at the DEC public hearing 6 weeks ago or so at Minders Academy, he had a room full of Seneca Falls residents clearly upset. Almost everybody spoke against the landfill. And he could have addressed them. He could have talked to them. And instead, he stood in the back after the proceeding, in the back with Mark Benjamin from Seneca Meadows, and made no attempt. There's no attempt to smooth things over. There's no attempt to bring people together. He's chosen his side in this division, and he makes no attempt to sort of right that. But we desperately need that. So whatever happens from November 7th forward, that has to be a priority, is bringing people back together and making people realize that the landfill and the tax rates, while connected, are not in opposition to each other. We can protect the tax rate. We can also move the landfill toward closure.
Now, Dave, you obviously have a slightly different perspective, given that you're already on the board, so you see it from behind the desk. Talk to us a little bit about what that polarization is like as a member of town council, trying to get things done on a monthly basis.
It's tough. I hate to say it, Vic and I are out in the loop. There's been a lot of things going on I'll ask Vic about, and he said, no, I didn't know anything. It's when they were going to rescind the law, with Law 2. Mm-hmm. We went in for a meeting one time, and Tom came up to me in the hallway, and he goes, geez, we're going to rescind Law 2. And I go, or Law 3, with Law 2. And I go, what are you talking about? He said, well, we had a call from Greg, Lou, and I, and that was going to put a Law 2 in to rescind Law 3. So Vic comes in for the meeting, and I said something to Vic with Tom. And I go, did you get a call about doing a Law 2 to rescind Law 3? And Vic goes, no. And Tom goes, I says, well, Tom did. And Tom goes to Vic and I, right there in the hallway, he says, I really don't want to rescind the law. Oh, that's good. That's 3 votes. We're in our conference room, and Greg comes in, and he calls Tom out to his office, and he comes back in. I'll never forget, Lou Farrar points his finger at him, and he goes, just like at high school, you got scolded by the principal. And I'm going, okay. And of course, everybody knows what happened in the meeting I brought up that Tom shouldn't vote, conflict of interest with 4,000. But he told Dick and I he didn't want to rescind the law. Well, he flipped right around and voted for it. And I kept asking during that every meeting, are we doing the right seeker? Pat Morrell sitting right next to me, and I go, Pat, are we sure we're doing the right seeker? We should be doing a long seeker, right? I don't want to end up like Del Lago did when they did the short one the first time. Mm-hmm. And of course, no, we're doing it because they wanted to rush this law through. Well, you see what happened now. It went to the courts, and we lost out as a town.
Now, I guess one of the more interesting storylines that's popped up out of Seneca Falls in the last several months has been the transition from Pat Morrell to a new town attorney. What is your feeling, each of you, on the new leadership in that role and how that whole process played out? Obviously, there have been a lot of calls from the public about whether that process was transparent enough, whether it can or cannot be talked about. I just, as candidates, I'm curious about what your positions are on that. Doug?
I think it was done poorly. I think it was done for the wrong reason. And again, I'm concerned that it shows who's pulling the strings. The only thing that I can recall in the last year where Pat has really disagreed with Greg and presented a stand that would be contrary to that of the landfill was over the town's operating permit that was tabled month after month after month because the landfill had not made improvements in the odor issue. And without any change in that situation, suddenly Pat was gone, and the new person was in, and the permit was issued. And the irony is that as a head of the environmental committee, I disagreed with Pat Morrell on several issues over the last 18 months, but it's the fact it was how he was replaced that I object to more really than that he was replaced. And if you're going to replace the town attorney, it would seem that would be done in public with transparency, with a search of appropriate candidates. Instead, there was none of that. After the fact, they had to amend the residency requirement in order to fit David Foster. I have nothing against David Foster. I've seen him now in just one town board meeting. He seems very articulate. He's very informative. He does a good job at keeping the people in the room apprised of the situation. But I think it was done very poorly. And again, I think it shows that Greg wanted him out, and I think behind that is the landfill wanted him out.
And Dave? Agree, disagree, fall somewhere in the middle?
I'm going to have to speak on confidentiality.
Yep.
I know what's going on. I mean, I think Greg even said it in public. I know things, but I can't, if I come out and say something, I'm sure Greg and everybody else will be after me to get me off the board. So I think, I got along good with Pat. There were some things I didn't like that was happening and maybe not fast enough. David Foster, I met with him a couple times. He seems to be pretty knowledgeable. It's funny because Lou asked me how I knew about him when it was brought up. Last November, I was at a party in Geneva, and I just kind of mentioned that, geez, I wish Pat would work a little faster on some things. And somebody made a comment to me, you ought to get David Lee Foster. Who's that? Well, he's a lawyer here in Geneva. He'd be good for the town. And that was this past November. Then all of a sudden, I got a call from Greg that we're going to have a meeting, and we're going to hire this lawyer, David Lee Foster. And when we went in to meet on it, I had said something. I had known of him, heard about him. And Louis asked me, well, how'd you hear? I said, well, last November. I just a little frustrated about a couple of things, and somebody told me at this party, well, gee, you ought to get David Lee Foster. Mm-hmm. He seems to be working pretty good. I worked with him last night on a new idea we're doing on the budget. Just Vic and I are on this budget committee right now. And then the five of us will get together later to hash over what we came up with. with the new budget. So that's all I can say. As far as Pat, confidentiality, I really can't say anything.
Right now, speaking to that budget, I'm interested. What are your sort of views and stances on how the past budget process and then this one? Doug, obviously, you were visible in both. You were present at those meetings. You were listening to the way the boards were moving through the process. Is there prospect for change, do you think, in that arena where the budget process could go a little more smoothly for department heads and for the town?
Well, from what I've heard, because I haven't been at the budget hearings, the process this year has become more politicized, more divisive. I think probably because of the calendar constraints on putting a budget together, and that there won't be much change for this year. I don't think we're going to change minds, but I can assure you that if we get the right people on the town board, that the atmosphere will change, and this is one place. I think the employees are becoming disenchanted. We've lost some good people, and that kind of morale, I think a lot of that stems from that comes from the top down. So we can slowly affect change. I have concerns about this year because we're already deep into the process, though.
Now, speaking of slowly affecting change, one of the issues where voters have been very concerned about and wanting to see more change more quickly is seeing more economic development in Seneca Falls. Very curious, and I'm sure voters are too, what each of you would like to see or how more business would be coming into Seneca Falls under your watch. Doug?
Me? Well, being on the economic development, like I said, as that group, we're trying to get more businesses in. We've had some local people that wanted to bring businesses in. Waterloo Container, I believe they were from France. They wanted to do juice. He wanted to put them in the B.E. Wright building. These people thought, well, we can get grapes from the south, apples from the north, have about 50 workers here in the building, which would be good, 50 people. They got to move here. They got to buy houses. They're going to spend money, which is good. And happened the day they were there, they come out, and what's that smell? Well, we have this landfill across the street, and every now and then we get this odor. They looked at Bill Lutz and said, sorry, we don't want to put our people to this. So there's one. I've heard a lot of people stay in the Hampton Inn. I was just talking to somebody the other day that had a death in their family, and he goes, my brother was here from town, and the odor was atrocious. How can businesses come around this? I mean, they knew the landfill was there. Anybody who's expanded knows it's there. I don't know, we just somehow got to get businesses in here, empty buildings or build. We want to do a sewer line out on Auburn Road. It's going to be $3 million. We just got a grant for $700,000 towards infrastructure. Greg's saying on the budget he wants to take $1 million. I'm saying maybe $750,000 and put it towards infrastructure for the future, towards this $3 million. I mean, if we got $1.5 million, we got to bond some, maybe get it done. We have people interested in going out on Auburn Road with businesses. Even the winery out there wants our water. Mm-hmm. We're trying to work with the town of Tyre to say, hey, give them water and get water out there, and then down 89 and around the Demons area. We have to have sewers, electric out in these areas too to draw businesses in. Mm-hmm. We have one company right now that would buy land out there off lot to put a business in there, but they don't have the electricity, the fiber optics, what they need, and this is what we got to get. Mm-hmm. We have to get that fiber optics out there, get a sewer out there, get this utilities to bring these businesses in and say, hey, okay, we got it. We got the electricity for you. The Coke plant, the old Coke plant right now that Carl Love's got, he's got up for sale. And he was just telling me the other day that he's a furniture business that wants to come in, and he has to get better electricity in there, voltage-wise, because of the machines. So that's another business. I don't know how many, I forgot to ask Carl how many employees that they're going to have, but at least it's a business coming in. We're trying. He's been working with the Seneca Falls Economic Development and coming to some of our meetings sometimes. So we're trying. We got to get businesses in here to help that tax base.
Is that sort of where it stands? So those two issues are married, and they are a couple, whether people want to recognize it or not. Failing infrastructure, lack of business, there is a correlation there. To that end, though, a lot of these big projects that you're talking about, sewer, water, you're talking about multi-year projects that can't be turned around in 1 year. What do you say to the voters who are, looking for something 6 months from now? They're looking for something now, essentially, because that's the way people are, unfortunately. What do you say to them? Wait for a couple years? Is that where it stands? Really?
That's difficult, but
Yeah.
that really is the most concrete answer, because nothing is going to happen very quickly. We have to make areas like Auburn Road give them the appeal to small manufacturers, to breweries, to wineries. But nothing's going to happen quickly. So in essence, yes, it is. You have to be patient, but we also, I think, have to do everything we possibly can to start to make strides forward where we can. From an emotional standpoint, the number of empty buildings in the downtown blocks are it just breaks your heart. Those buildings are ready to rent right now. We've got to find people that want to come in here with that kind of business, and a lot of that's going to be tourism related, and so that's related to, of course, how quickly can the new Women's Hall of Fame building get up and running, and how can we work together with the wineries and the breweries and so on that are all around us and that are bringing people through here. And then, of course, the gorilla in the room, of course, is still going to be the smell. And even that, even with the best of situations on the town board, we have to tell people that you're still going to have to be patient, because it's going to be, another 7 or 8 years before the smell actually, before the landfill closes, assuming that they can't get the smell under control. So I hate to tie everything into the landfill, because I'm trying to stay away from that, but they are. What goes on there is so tightly wound into every aspect of life in Seneca Falls, whether it's our government or the smell in the air or the appeal we have to businesses and to retailers. We're not going to get heavy duty and manufacturing back probably, but these small businesses, these small businesses like George Tilton's, like the things that Dave is talking about in the Coke plant and so on, I think those are doable, but we have to give them the infrastructure they need. We have to get the smell out of the air, and we have to keep the taxes reasonable. And I think they'll come. It's just it's such a gorgeous town, and it's such a gorgeous area that I think they'll come. And we obviously have to do everything we can to aggressively pursue them. But I think we can make it work.
Now, last question before we get you guys out of here. The number one reason why voters who are listening right now should vote for you. Dave, we'll start with you.
Well, very level-headed person. I don't fly off the handle. I listen to people. When people call me with a problem, I call the department head, or if it's code enforcement, get with whoever that problem is going to be solved with. And I get along very well with all the department heads and the people that work under them. I'm over at that office. I try to get in there 2-3 times a week. Sometimes it's more than that. The employees, I believe, all respect me. I try to help them if they have a problem. When the public has a problem, like I said, I'll call our department heads and get it done for them. It's the way I've always been. My wife says, "You got to be crazy for running." And I say, "Gene, I just enjoy it." When I call Jim Peterson on a problem and then have that person call me a half an hour later and say, "Hey, Jim Peterson was over and already took care of that," or "Joe Tulo took care of my problem," that's what I want to hear. try to help the people. People call me about code enforcement. We got a few things going on about that right now. I had a call while I was in a meeting the other day, and I said they have till the end of the month. They've had written letters. If they don't abide by it, they're going to go to court. I mean, I did all I could do to get the department heads and zoning and try to take care of the issue. So we'll leave it at that if it goes to court. I don't want to see it go to court, and I don't want people to be mad because they have to go to court over an issue, but they have to straighten out whatever they have.
Mm-hmm. And Doug?
I don't have the history that Dave does, so some of it's conjecture and some of it's personality. I do get along with people. I listen to people. I'm very interested and concerned about morale from top to bottom. And so, the employees that I don't see, that I don't know anything about, I want to get to know them, find out what it is that makes things work well and what makes things not work well, and try to act accordingly. I care so much about this community. That's why I stayed. That's why Susan and I plan to stay. And I've seen it, having gotten here in the 70s. I saw what this was. We got here sort of at the end of the college town kind of feel, and know what Seneca Falls was. And I'm anxious to try to get us back and take some steps in that direction.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming in today. Obviously, busy schedules for both of you heading into Election Day. Wish you the best of luck coming up here in the election.
Can I add,
very much.
On the election, in the past 2 times I've ran, for all you people out there, I've always gone door to door to every house. And if you weren't home, I left the literatures. This year, you will not see me because of a knee injury, and I have not been doing the walking that I normally do. But I still appreciate your vote, and I still care about them.
Well, we hope you heal quickly and get back up and fully running again. That's going to do it for us today, though. I'd like to thank Doug and Dave, our listeners, as well as FingerLakes1.com for making this podcast possible. Inside the FLX airs Sundays at 7 p.m. on Spectrum Channel 12 and is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and the FingerLakes1.com app. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.